And then Top Knee with the 2 $5 donos. Hear about Majority Report getting into a convo/argument on Russia and Ukraine. Sure, I'll look. And then we're learning.
Around. New Wave Libertarian Communists. What do you think about the International DSA Committee / Madison DSA drawing controversy for saying we should urge our legislatures not to send more aid to Ukraine that will prolong bloodshed and enrich the U.S. military-industrial complex? They have since deleted the tweets after strong pushback. I disagree with the criticism of that. I think that is a valid point and should be discussed more.
Exactly. And I think certainly, it's a valid point to stake if you're a leftist to be like, okay, we give aid to Ukraine with no strings attached. Certainly as a leftist, I would want to not do that at the very least. So staking out a position that's first.
I like how all of the other guys on the Majority Report, all the younger, more socialist people, when Sam Cedar is away, they all say shit that he would smack down if he was here.
Even if you want to give them aid, just seems to make sense. People aren't good at bargaining anymore. They just want to be all on the sleeve. Everyone's out there. No, it's we at the very least need some kind of tracking of these weapons, because they're not even only ending up in Ukraine, but much less. They're just going to warlords as people do.
No. What? I don't even know what people mean when they say this, tracking. You give the equipment to the Ukrainian government, obviously in a war zone, there's not going to be perfect efficiency. There is going to be corruption, like there would be in any conflict anywhere on Earth. But, it's being used to fight for Ukraine. Imagine condemning the people of Ukraine to death because, there was only 97% efficiency in getting the firearms to the front lines, as opposed to 100%.
I mean, and at the same time, Zelensky's now saying that he's not going to negotiate for peace or, look into that. And
What? No, he said he's not going to accept the negotiations Russia's put forward, which involve them keeping the territory they've invaded. He is perfectly fine to have peace after he gets back Ukraine.
Acceptable. I'm sorry. People get pissed at me for this, for my position on this, but I'm sorry. That is...
From his perspective, I understand it, of course.
From a position of rhetoric or whatever, sure. But as the official position behind the scenes is what's motivating our actions, it's not acceptable and it's wrong.
Well, it can't be from... We are a U.S.-based podcast, and so the thing is that if the United States is going to play this role in arming Ukraine, we have to be involved in diplomatic talks for peace. That has to happen.
I will say, though...
Wait, what? No? What? So, wait... Because we were giving weapons to Great Britain during World War II, that means we have to be, petitioning for Germany to make peace having conquered France? What? That doesn't make any sense, no. We do dictate the terms of our, preferred engagement. We say what we want to happen, and what we want to happen is for Ukraine to retake Ukraine. Which seems fine.
Though that whenever somebody brings up peace negotiations or peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, every time I've seen it, whether it was written or someone discussing it, what they mean is Ukraine giving up to Russia, Ukraine waving the white flag and giving in to whatever.
Yes, every time Russia has offered some kind of peace talk or conciliation. Dude, this is something that warmongers do all the time. They constantly make bad faith bids for peace as a way of distracting and emboldening people abroad and taking their side. Hitler did the exact same thing. Literally, he did. I had pretext for this, but I broke her now for peace. Why is everyone else forcing me to annex this territory? Yeah, Putin has never... If Putin didn't want the territories of Ukraine, he wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. He's the instigator here. This isn't a neutral conflict.
Russia's asking for. That's what I've seen, though. So
that's what we have power over. Would Ukraine be okay without our material support? So we have a say in the outcome here. It's not we
do. We do have a say, and we've chosen that Ukraine gets to be Ukraine.
Don't just defer to Zelensky. He's not the president of this now.
But the problem with us having a say in that outcome is that the people in power don't really feel like there is any urgency to end the conflict.
No, of course not. They agree.
What? The Ukrainian forces are making incredibly quick progress. They're reclaiming, like, every day I wake up and there's like a whole like new swath of land they've reconquered. They're making incredibly quick progress. If we wanted this to be an interminable slog, then why wouldn't we give them less equipment? We've given them like a lot of really good stuff. This is incoherent, yeah. It's just like a bunch of kids talking about like shit they don't understand. Fuck, some of these people are probably older than me, but like there's not a high level of thought going into this discussion, you know?
Agree with all the people who get pissed at us for even talking about this and want to teach.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, because like you're basically saying that Ukraine's in the wrong for wanting the weapons to resist a fascist invasion. That's what I mean, that's what's being said here. Like, yeah, that's the thing that's being said.
Teach Putin a lesson, regardless of if it leads to world war or nuclear exchange.
But that's what my concern is that the United States is incentivized for this to continue to weaken Putin, as opposed to, like, I'm concerned about people continuing to die. And, like,
Well, wait, what? Obviously, the U.S. wants to weaken Putin as a geopolitical goal, but there's also another non-U.S. centric ethical argument for not allowing Russia to successfully fascistly invade Ukraine. The Russians are the ones killing people. We keep unearthing mass graves as we pull them back from the territory. If you want the killing to stop, then Russia has to leave. That's how it works.
I'm also concerned about peace protesters within Russia, and if there is like larger conscription for the troops there, because I just don't want more people dying for this war, you know?
Wait, we should stop supporting Ukraine so that the people in Russia who want Russia to pull back don't get hurt by the government that invaded Russia? We should let Russia win so there aren't any more peace protesters in Russia for the Russian government to persecute? This is incomprehensible.
So,
Yeah, I think, you know,
Or we just trust NATO, and maybe people just want us to do that.
it's not easy.
You know, I think from
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's not easy. And I think from the leftist standpoint, it's very difficult. And we find ourselves not just in the case of Ukraine versus Russia escalation, but in the case of a lot of our societal issues, both domestic and abroad, being cut out of the conversation up until the point where it's like, oh, there's a global catastrophe that we've been ignoring you along every step along the way in terms of like, how do we prevent, you know, how do we like move towards a more egalitarian, more like internationalist position? You know, they've ignored the left the entire time, and you know, they just want to turn to do like a gotcha. Like, well, now that we're literally already in a quagmire that we've created of our own volition, or like that has.
What? NATO is doing a gotcha to Western lefties? And then we created the Ukraine conflict that's a quagmire for us, even though we don't have any troops there, by making Russia invade. Man, I want to get along with the rest of the online left, but like, this is really dumb. I swear to God, like, liberals consistently have better like takes on foreign policy issues than lefties do most of the time. Because they have no, like, there's just, like, the brain rot is insane.
Has been created, and we haven't been over the past few decades trying to establish any sort of meaningful relationships on a global scale. What do we do now when our only options are war and weapons? And it's just like, well, we just have to work towards suing for peace, and in the future work towards having a stronger, better international body than.
Okay, so what he's saying right now doesn't mean anything. Russia invaded Ukraine. This has nothing to do with building a stronger international body for peace. As we said, like, this doesn't mean anything, like, at all right now.
Simply NATO and the UN, because, you know, we'll just keep finding ourselves in this place. We're like, oh yeah, we can't just have a trillion quagmires around the world, even if it does.
It's not a quagmire for us. It's a quagmire for Russia and Ukraine because Russia invaded. We're not in a quagmire. We don't have troops there.
does enrich the people within both our country and in Russia and in Ukraine who make money from being involved in like decades-long quagmires and wars. You know, I think that we just
Yes, we have an arms industry that makes money from conflict. That does not mean that it is morally wrong for us to defend countries that are being invaded by fascists. Yeah, like, the problem that I have, there are so many, like, people keep saying West bad, NATO bad, arms industry bad, and then they, like, smugly smile at you and put their hands on their hips, like they've solved the issue. Like, all that stuff was true back in World War II. We didn't have NATO back then, but we had the countries that made up NATO's interests, right? At least some of them. But obviously that's not like the be all end all, because unless you're what's that dipshit's name? The guy with the soup brain. The guy who was defending Germany, saying that US shouldn't have invaded. Michael Tracy. Yeah. Unless you're Michael Tracy, like, you're probably going to agree that it was good for us to participate in the invasion of Nazi Germany, right? Liberating France, like, that was pretty cool. So like, okay, so yeah, West bad, arms industry bad, but also maybe that time it was good for us to invade.
just have to have a society and a government and an international geopolitical strategy that is less gripped by, you know, the dual-headed monster of the military-industrial complex and neoconservative zealots. Because, yeah, you know, what do you do when, like, Russia's already in Ukraine? Like, well, you rent a time machine and go back and, like, prevent and, like, start working on bettering.
Wait, is that his actual solution to the Russian invasion? Wait, is that... Did I mishear that?
Conservative zealots. Because, yeah, you know, what do you do when, like, Russia's already in Ukraine? Like, well, you rent a time machine and go back and, like, prevent and, like, start working on bettering relationships between the Eastern and Western countries. But you don't, but certainly once you're here, it's like we can't keep.
Oh. Okay, I guess that would have been a good idea. I guess I'm pretty mad at NATO for not doing that one then.
Escalating, because this is a good example of why we can't, you know, why we need to start building these long-term relationships, because every skirmish that has world leaders in it now, we've been.
I also don't think it's escalating to provide weapons to a country that's being invaded. I think, like, the big escalation there was the invasion. I don't think, like, escalation means that you're raising the standard of the conflict, and it was already a total invasion, a full annexation of a massive country. I feel like giving Ukraine the ability to defend itself would be, it's the same conflict. I don't think it's escalation. If Ukraine then went and invaded Russia, I would consider that an escalation, because now it's the conflict is being held on within another country's borders. But as long as it takes place within Ukraine and remains non-nuclear, I don't think it's an escalation.
Told can't happen. We've been told that it's the end of history. No more of these skirmishes can happen between, like, world powers. But, like, they clearly can. And now nuclear weapons are.
What? People have been warning about Russian aggression in Ukraine since 2014.
Always going to be on the table, and any conflict has the capability of escalating to a nuclear one. And so that's just more.
Which, by the way, Hitler didn't have nukes when he invaded Poland.
And that just creates more.
I like the explicit appeasement take here, where it's like, okay, well, appeasement was bad with Hitler because that he didn't have nukes, but Putin does have nukes, so appeasement is good. But we're doing the direct Hitler comparison.
Make that comparison. It's facile, childish.
Oh,
exactly. And I mean, I think the existence of nuclear weapons should be the people's understanding that, you know, war just can't be the solution to all of our international problems now.
Tell Putin that Ukraine didn't start the war.
Because it just now ends, like, we just get to this point where it's like Russia's either in a quagmire or we end up in nuclear war, and neither of those are, like, actually what's best for people on the ground.
I mean, people say, like,
I don't know if all these you know, these are all great points, but I don't know if they're all so relevant in this specific case. I mean, you know, Russia seemed to be the one, unless someone wants to try to convince me differently, to, like, they're the one who invaded Ukraine. They're the ones occupying.
No, NATO invaded Ukraine. My name is Vaush. I only read lefty Substacks, and I'm very confident, actually, that NATO invaded Ukraine. That's the position, I think.
upon
Yeah,
Ukraine.
they're
the
absolutely
aggressor.
the aggressor.
And the world seems pretty united on this one, more united than they have for anything in a long time, that Ukraine is in the right and Russia's in the wrong. Russia has very few allies.
But Binder, the world is not.
Like how everyone jumped to respond to that. Like that was like a bad, like that very straightforward thing. Like everyone's like, okay, but, you know.
United in like this conflict should be like I think there's a lot of differing views from differing parts of the world on like what the response to this should be, and I think like being skeptical.
Okay, first of all, that's always the case, and second of all, it's pretty overwhelmingly slanted in favor of direct support for Ukraine. Like, to the extent that you can get the governments of the world to agree on something, this has been a pretty big slam dunk. You know, this is a pretty direct.
Of continuing blank checks for like war material, like
they're not blank checks. America chooses the amount that we deal with. I don't know why they say blank check. A blank check is if Ukraine could spend any amount of our money. We're not. We make deals. We choose the amount that we give them. It's not a blank check.
I don't think that's supportive at all around. Like, do you think China supports that? Like, what do you mean the world?
Oh, China. Even China, Russia's ally, wouldn't endorse their invasion. And recently, China's been getting even more negative towards Russia. Apparently, recently, China said something about Russia being an embarrassment. I'd have to look to find that article. Because Russia really holds China back. Also, like, what's the argument here? Like, China refuses to take a side, so we should let Ukraine die?
I think, and Bender, let me just see if you feel like this is a decent assessment. Like, we can still be immensely sympathetic to and completely understanding of Ukraine's desire to maintain their border.
Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers.
And like for them to want to fight to the bitter end to make sure that their country remains intact. That is a natural feeling, I would imagine, for people within Ukraine broadly, while at the same time having, I think, a more zoomed out perspective and saying, okay, when you don't have a dog in this fight, how do we reduce bloodshed as soon as possible?
We're doing it. This is how you do it. Obviously. Letting Russia, a fascist country, which is talking about the ethnic elimination of Ukraine and Ukrainian people, conquer Ukraine, is not the anti-bloodshed option. This is just appeasement logic. Like, do you really want to normalize Russia or any other autocratic country being able to just invade and conquer and rape and kill whenever they want because actually you're making it worse by defending them? Should we have not intervened with Germany? Like, oh yeah, they conquered Poland and France, but there'd be so much more bloodshed if only we went and fought with them more, you know? Stop the bloodshed. When will it end? You say as like soldiers are dying on Normandy Beach. You know, like what the fuck? What the fuck is this?
And I think that makes it a complex conversation.
Like when
also when we go, if we go strictly by like what we here in the U.S. decide is enough. I mean, isn't that us deciding this too for the people of Ukraine? Like, I don't care about the Ukrainian
Binder,
government.
let's make it concrete. Like, what if they say, okay, we want Crimea back? Do we just continue like?
Well, it was illegally annexed 8 years ago, so okay, sure, yeah. The world doesn't recognize Crimea as being part of Russia for the most part. Ukraine certainly doesn't. I don't know.
I'm saying I don't support that. I'm saying I don't think that is something that I think we should risk world war and a nuclear exchange for. I'm thinking like I don't think that I don't support that. I draw a line there.
And I think
why? Just that's it? Just that's it? Like that's it? I've said this before, and I want to make this clear, okay? I don't think that us supporting Ukraine increases the likelihood of nuclear war in the long term. The problem is Russia is a dying fascist empire with a bunch of nukes, no matter what. And it's a country crazy enough to put everything on the line just to annex a neighboring territory, knowing how dangerous the risks are. Like, Putin's going Joker mode here. I don't think that appeasement works out in the long run. So you give all the fascists and nationalists in Russia a big win if they get, like, a part of Ukraine or all of Ukraine. Like, what lesson does that teach them? Oh, now Putin knows any time he wants to reinvigorate the national spirit, he just annexes a local territory. He just invades. He just uses the military. You have to show him and you have to show the world that this is just not... You have to break them. You have to break them. That's it. I genuinely think that's the best way, because if you let Russia just have a part of Ukraine, Putin's numbers go back up, the oligarchy goes back up, they grow stronger, all their arguments are reinvigorated, people in Ukraine are raped, they suffer, they die, and you haven't fixed the problem. Russia is now no more liberal, they're less liberal. You've now rewarded them for their fascism. So what happens the next time they stir up conflict? It's not like modern day Russia doesn't like doing that. What happens the next time they want to threaten, like, what if they threaten a NATO country, like they do every week? Every week they threaten nuclear war with a NATO country. Every week. US interventionism in the world is, we will use any means, including nuclear, to defend Russian interests. Like, they do this all the time. They need to be broken. I'm sorry. They're literally like a rogue terrorist state with a fuck ton of nuclear weapons, and they're going to keep waving them around until eventually one day a brain aneurysm fires off in Putin's head and he hits the big red button. Something needs to be done. Appeasement does not, like, reduce the likelihood of nuclear war. All you do is kick it down and make it more likely in the future. I think it's better to be decisive now than to keep throwing it to the next generation. Like, okay, well, in 10 years, Russia will be dying even more and will be even more deranged. And now they want to, like, kick up poll numbers again. You know, like, what are we going to do now, right? The appeasement will never end, you know? That's what I think. And you know what? If the world ends for it, I stay by my logic. I do. Because I really think that this shit is just going to keep getting kicked down the road. I do. I support what I think is the least dangerous path. But some people are cowards. And they don't actually care about eliminating the risk. They just care about making it tomorrow's problem, you know? They just don't want to have a hand in it. That's what they don't want, you know? Whether or not nuclear war happens, it is the prerogative of the Western leftists to ensure that America did nothing to possibly prevent it from happening. That's their prerogative.
The Biden administration would, because Obama essentially did not follow through and understood that Crimea was gone.
Should we have just assassinated Putin?
Wait, what? Obama threw a fuck ton of sanctions onto Russia. Wait, what? Wait, we levied heavy sanctions against Russia after the annexation of Crimea. What was he supposed to do? Send in troops to occupy? Didn't he arm Ukraine?
Putin after he took Crimea. Is that what people? Is that what the?
Through and understood that Crimea was gone.
Should we have just assassinated Putin after he took Crimea? Is that what?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that what the right? Like, of course. So we agree that there's lines to be drawn, and like this whole thing about you're trying to, appease a dictator. I just think it's like you need to read more than just one book on World War II.
Seriously? Well, you think appeasement for dictator is bad? Maybe read a book. Seriously?
Well, I don't know what the end. This is not my area of expertise, honestly. So I don't know what the end game is here, nor do I have any conclusions. But I mean, I don't know what the end game that they're hoping for is.
Reminder that a great deal of bloodshed probably could have been avoided if the annexation of the Sudetenland had been met with immediate and massive sanctions and military buildup around Germany. Like, a reminder that the sooner we acted defensively with Nazi Germany, the more could have been done, probably, to prevent bloodshed. It wouldn't have stopped them from taking, or the Anschluss, yeah. It wouldn't have stopped them from taking France or part of Poland. There still would have been a lot of war, but it probably would have helped, yeah.
Is, I guess, hoping that people in Russia somehow overthrow Putin themselves. I don't know, that they just get so angry over Putin's decisions. I don't know.
That'd be good. Yeah, well, that's the hope, right? That's the best case scenario, yeah. That Putin's behavior incites like civilian revolt. That would be the hope, you know? Just a sec. The annexation of the Anschluss was in March of 1938. an entire year and a half before World War II started. The Sudetenland was annexed a year before World War II started. A whole extra year to be fully ready for Adolf Hitler. They might have been able to keep France from being overridden. Unlikely, but possible, maybe. Don't forget the Rhineland. When was the Rhineland? 36. That was 3.5 years before World War II.
But I mean, what do we do here? Like, if Putin doesn't want to leave unless he gets everything he wants, then like, what do we do? Just
kill
give
him.
up? We just say, Ukraine, you're on your own. Go,
I'm just
I don't
saying
care about the government.
I'm saying I am fine with concessions that a lot of pro-Ukrainian folks, and in a world without nuclear weapons, I'd agree. Maybe we fund this a lot more, but I am okay with, like, say, we're going to not keep pushing guns over there until the Ukrainians take back Crimea. I think that, like, things like that should be okay to say. And for a lot of people, they're not okay to say. And that's, I think, the biggest problem in American discourse right now, because there isn't a, like, the fucking great...
At the end of the day, you give Ukraine the guns, they do with them what they want. You know, if you give Ukraine the guns, like, they're the ones who decide how to move forward with their troops. If you say, like, no, actually, we would rather let Russia take all of Ukraine than Ukraine take Crimea, then that's essentially just a pro-Russian position.
Gray zone, they don't have any power except online. They're not getting in the way of any of this. There's actually no, like, that. I am not concerned that, like, Putinist propaganda is having an effect on our policy.
That's true. You know who is? The far right in America, who are the only other people who oppose giving weapons to Ukraine. The Nazis and alt-righters and QAnoners in government are the loudest voices in America against funding Ukraine. I wonder why.
I think, like, the only thing it's doing is letting people, like, ignore sort of lessons about post-nuclear technology, like, that we should...
Which, by the way, Putin has taken control of the largest nuclear facility in Europe, which was within Ukraine. So just something to note.
Yeah.
That was a nuclear power plant, not a nuclear weapon. And I think he recently lost control of it because of the weapons we gave Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, like, the stakes of this can't be just, like, we can't let the
No, he still has it? We'll see for how long.
Bad guy have a win, because, like, I think...
But it is also sovereignty, I mean, for Ukraine. Like, so I feel like it is...
I agree with the sovereignty, but, like, that sovereignty is backed up by us, and, like...
Yeah? Does something morally good become morally bad just because it's on our side? American diabolism, man.
Again, like, Crimea was taken by Russia. Should we have started a world war then? No, I don't think... Does anybody agree with that?
No, but we didn't. We didn't start it. We're not starting it now. We're not starting a world war. It's a conflict between the state of Ukraine and the state of Russia. Guys, it is not exactly new to fund countries you support in a war without directly involving yourself. It happens all the time. Most of the time, when there is a direct war between two countries, other countries on that country's side will funnel arms and money to them. This happens, like, all the time, everywhere. It's totally normal. This isn't some, like, unique modern thing. It's not a world war.
No,
so,
no,
like,
no.
I don't know.
Well, I think also it was a lot different. Russia doing what they did in Crimea, and then Russia, having troops trying to get into Kyiv. This is a big difference.
Absolutely, it's a crime. Like, it's the exact same thing as it's the same sort of crime as us invading Iraq, and, like, it's bad. But I don't think, like, ending the conflict as opposed to, like, flooding it with guns is what the left should be that should be the goal.
You don't. Ending the conflict, you don't get any points for ending the conflict when the bad guys win. Like, in World War II, you can't, like, Hitler can't have taken over the world, and you're like, phew, as a lefty, I'm relieved. Finally, the conflict is over, as you're being, like, carted over to the death camp. You don't get credit for ending a conflict if the ending is bad.
Goal.
I mean, I agree, and I think I agree with mostly what everyone said. My only thought is, and didn't add to that, is that like I think we, as leftists, have a goal in mind, a general goal in mind for how the conflict ends, with like not so much bloodshed, and obviously not a long-term occupation of Ukraine by Russian powers.
I can't believe the lefty position isn't just, I hope the fascists lose when they invaded the democracy. Isn't that like such a normal thing? Like, what's your position? Oh, I hope the fascists lose in their invasion. What a crazy thing for a lefty to believe, right?
Or even let's say like the rolling back of Ukrainian borders. I think what we have a difficulty with is that the only tools and pieces we have on the board as U.S. citizens are arming everybody, because we have over the past 50 years, especially post-Cold.
Again, please keep in mind that funding countries that you're allied with when they're in a war is a totally normal thing that's happened for as long as like nation states have existed, and before that kingdoms did the same thing. This is not like some weird magical US thing.
War, we've gone out of our way to remove, if leaving like this sort of the veneer of like the other tools that we might use to get to the position of peace, or at least non-conflict. We have established.
No, Russia invading Ukraine is not on us. Sorry. I know we fucked them over after the Cold War. I know the shock doctrine fucking sucked. I'm not saying we fucked them over. We did fuck them over. I'm not saying we didn't. But no, you can't like, the West has failed to investigate modes of peace when Russia just randomly fucking put a bunch of troops on the border to Ukraine and then invaded. Like, you can't, like, that just, they did it.
The geopolitical
well, this enriches
scale,
people, right? Like
exactly. The continued Cold War that exists in terms of like military races between NATO and like Russia and China still enriches people.
It doesn't exist. We're not in a military race with Russia. They can barely feed their own people.
And rolling that back, even though it would give us better tools to prevent conflicts or solve conflicts like this, don't necessarily. And so from my point as a leftist, I just find it to be like, it's a very difficult question to ask, like, well, yeah, like how do we stop a war if that for over the past 50 years, we've removed every option but like more war? And
I don't know what other thing we could have done to prevent this conflict. Matt's in YouTube chat. Matt! You're the most reasonable person here. Matt, what's going on, man? What's happening? What's happening, man? What's going on?
We're not trying the other options. And so, I can't necessarily give a right or a prediction for what's going to happen in this particular circumstance, because we got here without actively engaging with how to prevent it. So I think that all we can really do is look at the circumstance, look at the tools that we lack to solve it in the way that we normally, or rather we would prefer to solve it, and work towards actively sort of rebuilding those tools within our society. I
don't know what this means. Russia invaded Ukraine. If we're talking about broadly, like, should we make an effort to sort of promote like peace and detente and da-da-da? Like, I fully agree, but in the context of the existing Ukraine conflict, right? Like, what do we do? Sanction them harder? Like, clearly that didn't even work after 2014, I don't think it really bears much towards the current conflict.
A cultural level, for people to understand that they can like actively protest for peace, or actively protest not just like special interest groups, but also just like reestablish our international bodies and international relationships in a way that we can have more leverage for these sorts of things, opposed to like I'd say like China being correct when they say like, oh, America invaded Iraq and all over the Middle East, so like what is their real moral high ground? It's not enough to go like, well,
that's not a valid geopolitical argument. We're not arguing over who has the high ground here. It's about whether an individual action is morally defensible or not. You can't. It's always like what is that really meant to be a good argument from China? Like oh, well, yeah, our ally might be doing a fascist invasion that the U.S. doesn't like, but remember when the U.S. did its own invasion? Like what learning are we meant to get from this? What information are we obtaining? Matt Binder? Yeah, I know. Matt Binder. Oh, God, wait. Is it Binder? Wait, did I mispronounce it? Is it Binder or Binder? Isn't it Binder? Oh, I'm wrong. It's Binder. Oh, my God. Okay. Binder. All right. Well, now I feel bad. I guess people fuck up my name all the time anyway, so, whatever. Well, anyway, Matt, if you'd like to talk about it, I'm certainly happy to. If you don't want to, that's also fine. Like Bin Laden. Yes, like Bin Laden. Hero of the Saudis. Doesn't he hate you? I don't think Matt Binder hates me. He might though after this. No, I think Matt's been the most reasonable here. The problem is that there's kind of like there's just like an IQ dampening whirlpool that happens when leftists talk about foreign policy. Like that this sort of invariably brings down it you know, it brings down the whole man. If he'd like to talk, then I'm happy to. He's watching right now. Hello.
Different in our media. We have to actually be working towards tools that prove it's different, because so we can use them, not just so we can point to them. But I'm sorry, I went on there kind of fast.
No. This is a good discussion, and I mean,
No, it's not. I want to be clear, by the way. I genuinely do not think that the disagreements that I have here are out of malice. I don't know. The left is just sort of coded so improperly. Yeah, let's talk. How should we hook up? Oh, dope. Do you have Discord? I'll, here, let me just, Twitter you my Discord handle. There it is. Just friend request me at that. And, Matt Bin Laden coming in. Hell yeah. A second Matt has hit the, Vaush stream. Why is it taking a while to send? Why is it taking a while to send a Twitter DM that was composed entirely of text? What did I just do? Is it because it was a hashtag, so it's like loading? Okay, that worked. Okay, yeah, that just friend request me there. Let me pee real quick, then I guess we'll talk to Matt. Matt Bin Laden. Ah! Whoa!
Hello?
Hey, you fucking spooked me there, Matt.
Oh, you hear me? You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. How you doing, Vaush?
Woo! Hey, got my heart rate up. Not young anymore. I'm doing good. Nice to talk to you. Sorry about the circumstances by which we are talking, but nonetheless nice.
No, I mean it's nice to finally talk with you. Yeah, I know. I feel like we have been living in adjacent worlds for so long, yet never have crossed paths officially.
Yeah, it's on the periphery, you know, which has been adjacency of respect, of course. You know, considering the fact that I have an actively antagonistic relationship with most people in the online left, non-contact's actually relatively good.
I mean, I swear when that person who asked you right now, doesn't Matt hate you? I have heard this from more than one person over the past like 2 or 3 years. I've just randomly seen online whenever like somehow Majority Report and Vaush come up, someone go, yeah, doesn't Matt Binder not like Vaush? I have never said that. I think the only time I've ever really gave an opinion about you was when you watched my critique of Jimmy Dore promoting that Boogaloo Boy on his show, and I said, oh, that's awesome. Vaush just watched my entire video on his feed. I mean, maybe it was the big anti-Vaush 24-hour stream I held a couple months ago.
Of course, a tradition in the left space. I like that video. The misconception is probably on me. I think you might have unfollowed me at some point, or maybe it didn't even happen. I don't know. I don't have a great memory. I have I don't get along with a lot of folks, so sometimes if I see something like a little like that, I just go like, okay, they don't like me too, and then my audience, like, you know, sort of riles it up into a big thing. That's my fault if that's the case. Either way, I hope you're having a wonderful night. So nuclear war is bad, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't know how you would be, think it's good.
Well, there are posadists out there, you know. There are anti-natalists who are just trying to get the process kicked off.
Right, right. But on the majority report earlier today, my position has been that you can pretty much you don't have to be rah 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 Ukraine. I understand people don't like Zelensky or the Ukrainian government or obviously the Nazis that are involved on the Ukrainian side, such as the Azov Battalion. Sure, no one has to be pro the Ukrainian government.
I
But
directly support
there's
the Azov Battalion, actually. Fully committed to that plan.
right, right. You have a Azov tattoo on your like a whole big like the emblem on your
My
chest, right?
whole back and chest, it wraps around. Yeah, like it's a full body thing.
Right, right. And so, because this is the thing, like everyone focuses on neolibs in the US or the Western world in general being like, cornily and sickly pro, like Zelensky talking about how great he is. And I get the backing away from any sort of world leader at any, from any country, and not wanting to be so pro, like the government in any country, Ukraine included. But there's one specific group of people who are being killed and are completely innocent in the matter, and that's the Ukrainian people, the people in the country, the men, women, and children who have nothing to do with the fighting, whose home was invaded by an outside force, an imperialist power that is Russia. And I don't get the people who I mean it's almost just like the critique, the focus on the critique of the Ukrainian side is like just a way to hide, I guess, people who are just want to be openly pro Putin. Like they like that he is this authoritarian. They like what Russia does, and I don't know. I guess it's because how the rest of the world looks at Russia and Putin. They just have to hide it for I don't know opportunistic reasons. I don't get the people. Just come out and say that you're a Putin fanatic or you're pro Russia. There's no need to keep hiding behind this like weird Ukraine. And I don't think that's, to be completely clear, that's not Matt Leck and Brandon Sutton and Emma over on the majority report. I disagree with them, but they're not on who I'm talking about. But I think the reason why these debates are so hard to sort of have is that the majority of people who do criticize Ukraine, at least online, are those types.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get the problem is, unfortunately, and this is what people always run up against, is that at the end of the day, there are only two sides, right? There's the thing that can happen, and then there's the other thing that can happen. You can inject as much nuance you want into analysis, but usually in terms of your ability to affect an outcome, especially when it comes to stuff like international conflict over which an individual has a vanishingly small effect, you know, you get one side or the other. And right now the two sides are, do you provide aid for Ukraine or not? I don't think everyone who's opposed to providing aid to Ukraine is some kind of Putin simp. I think a lot of them are. I think the biggest ones aren't the tanky types or whatever. I think they're the American fascists, right? Like the MTG types or whatever, who will say like not a dollar more for Ukraine until we do this, that, the other. In reality, of course, as fascists, they want to support fascists abroad. Trump got along with Putin. He talks up China in like an authoritarian sense, like murdering drug dealers, like with barely any trial. The fashion in which he engages with these people indicates, which I think has always been the case, like, fascists get along, right? Italy, Germany, Japan. There should be ideological contradictions here, but there just aren't. They're just bad people. But within the purview of like good people, right? Like, well, we shouldn't provide aid to Ukraine. I don't know. I kind of like providing aid to Ukraine. I kind of like the fascists losing. I like them dying. I wish they wouldn't. I wish they wouldn't invade. But in the context of an already existing fascist invasion, I think the idea, like, I hope the fascists lose and die, is a fairly straightforward and historically leftist talking point. I don't know why it's so unpopular now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the discussion we're having earlier on the majority report, the idea that Yeah, I said it in the chat because this is something that I'm constantly trying to figure out. Like, what is it about Russia and Ukraine, the situation in Russia and Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine? Why has it been so divisive and on the left? And I think it's because the U.S. usually is either the imperialist or on the imperialist side, I guess. And this is a rare occasion where we aren't we're not doing the imperialism, and we're not on the side of the country doing the imperialism.
We're the good guys for once. No, but well, I mean, I agree, right? No, really, right? We spent the entire Cold War being like, if not the bad guys, at the very least, the other bad guys, in most
Right.
every conflict we got involved in. And, now, of course, the Iraq War, still rings in everyone's minds when we think of like any kind of interventionist attitude abroad. And I think a lot of lefties also kind of defend Russia and a lot of other countries that don't like the US as the remnants of the Cold War, like the displaced side, right? Like, well, maybe they lost the Cold War, but we still have to critically support anti-imperialist hegemons that form other geopolitical blocks, which I don't necessarily support. I think multipolarity is actually quite destructive. Unfortunately for us. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I just think the practical concern is like, to what extent is this like exacerbating nuclear tensions, right? I mean, I think that's like the
Right.
most sensible concern.
Right. I mean, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I don't know if we would. I mean, obviously, just the threat of it being a possibility is certainly worrisome, but I don't know if we would get there from this. I mean, I feel like, Putin is sort of losing even the PR battle at home. And I feel like if it even got raised to the point where it looked like he would do something, would the people in Russia stand for it? I mean, I feel like that's sort of what that we're waiting for at some point, like for the people there to just have enough of it and rise up. I mean, they already don't support the war, it seems, based on the fact that they're losing terribly, and now people are being drafted, which is never a popular move for the civilians of the country that's holding the draft. So I mean, I don't know if that's something that's a possibility, but I feel like that's what the U.S. government might be holding out for.
I hope for it too. I mean, I think this comes across as rather ruthless on my part, but I genuinely believe it. Russia's functionally a rogue state right now. They don't get along with China. The only countries that will go to bat to defend them are like North Korea and Syria. Like they don't represent a broad coalition of geopolitical interests. They're an autocracy. They're deliberately violent. They constantly threaten to begin nuclear war. I mean, they threaten nuclear war with us all the time. They have to be broken, essentially. Putin's regime, I don't care about America conquering them or any bullshit like that. I just care about them not being the way they are. Like that's what I care about. And I'm hoping that like meeting really strong resistance in Ukraine, losing to Ukraine in the midst of this economic crisis and draft, like this is the stuff that gets people like Putin hung upside down for. And I'm really, really hoping something like that happens. And if that does happen, like I would be the first to advocate for like really aggressive reparations to Russia. Like, hey, we sanctioned you for ages. Also, really sorry about the shock doctrine. Here you go. We will not be cunts this time. We will. Here you go. Like, have the wealth of the West. Like, our pockets are open to you, gentlemen. Whether or not that actually happens, it's not likely. But first things first, you know what I mean, right? Like they're dangerous, the Putin administration. And I think something needs to incite internal revolt. And it certainly wouldn't be them winning in Ukraine. That would only make him look better. That would, I think, prolong the danger.
Right, right. I think the issue really is that I guess for a lot of leftists, they don't like that the U.S. is funding this. But what do we do? Like, what do we do here? Like, do we just like there's only people keep saying we should be working towards peace negotiations. That was at least the discussion on in a majority report. Matt Leck was saying how the U.S. is just funding this war to keep it going, and that there's no attempt to have any sort of peace negotiations. Every time, like I don't know what the U.S.'s position on that is in terms of has there been any attempt? Are they even looking to do that? I don't know. Maybe it's something they are working on in the background. I'm sure they're trying to have some sort of, you know, uh, connection to someone in Russia, at the very least, to figure out what's going on. But whenever I hear about peace negotiations, I mean, we saw it so in your face, and I'm glad he did it because I think it totally represents, he's the perfect representative of that type. Elon Musk earlier this week with his idea of peace negotiations basically being give Russia everything they want and Ukraine agrees to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I've heard from anyone who says peace negotiations. I've heard no one say, all right, Ukraine's got to give up something, Russia's got to give up something. Like, I don't even saying like I would agree with that or Ukraine would agree with that or you would agree with that, but at least that's something that's, someone from both sides has to give. I never hear that. It's literally just, okay, Russia, you get everything, and then you agree to leave Ukraine, or what's left of it at least, right? Okay, everyone's fine. I mean, who are we to say that like the same people who are so anti-U.S. imperialism wants Ukraine to give up their their sovereignty to an imperialist country? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, I agree, and I think there's a wide, diverse range of reasons why people are like that. But at the end of the day, it's almost impossible to engage in any of these negotiations because Russia never engages in them in good faith, right? Like both of the Minsk agreements after Euromaidan, they put forward like, oh yeah, let's have this ceasefire, and then immediately broke it, or never even attempted to not break it, really. They've historically used negotiations and ceasefires as a way of sort of, how do you say it? Like, trying to lure the opposition into a false sense of security or posture internationally as the peacemaker, like, oh, look at me, I'm suing for peace, and the peace they're suing for is one in which they get to keep the territory that they're currently losing. And yeah, I don't know. It's very frustrating, I guess. I don't think peace on its own is a virtue, right? It's almost like the liberal value. What do they say? A negative peace as opposed to a positive justice. That's the MLK quote. Well, obviously, the positive justice here is the sovereignty of Ukraine's borders, and if that involves a bit more fighting, I mean, fuck, we decided it was worth it with Hitler, so I don't know. People are worried about the nukes, I guess, but I feel like the best bet to make the world more safe, nuke-wise, is the ousting of Putin's regime and have some other, I don't know, some other oligarchical interest. God help them if they try an actual liberal democracy, just something that isn't Putin, something less that, And I just worry we'll only embolden them if we basically like let them get a W out of this,
Right. I mean, yeah, I just don't understand. Like, even the people who are sort of like, I understand you hear these numbers going out there, the billions of dollars that the U.S. is sending over there. But you also should know that if you're a leftist, like that's also like a Marjorie Taylor Greene type take where, oh, we're sending all this money over there and not investing that money here. I mean, that's not like that was earmarked for people here. And we're like, oh, sorry, impoverished Americans, we can't
directly
feed you
from the
because
homeless vet fund, yeah.
Yes, it's not like that money was going to the people here anyway. I mean, it was going to go to some other, to do some other, foreign policy shenanigans the U.S. takes always gets itself involved in some other country. So I mean, that's not the take. If you're, I can understand, and I agree with the take that, and this was one of Matt Leck's takes that. We're sort of just sending money over there and not really putting any, rules to the use of that money. Like maybe we should be like, all right, probably we should not be boosting Azov battalion. Don't you have? Isn't there a whole rest of your military we could be helping out here? There could be certain oversight on where the weapons go and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to maintain that because like a country being invaded is going to have logistical problems. Like countries, even when they're not being currently invaded, have like pretty big logistical issues. Like the U.S. Pentagon has a bunch of money that just went fucking missing when they were audited. And I can only imagine it's much worse in like a post-Soviet country that's currently being invaded by the inheritor state of the Soviet Union. I expect a degree of misappropriation. It seems like for the most part, like pretty good use has been made of what we give them. Like we haven't heard of any like third factions cropping up anywhere. Like there haven't been any militia groups that have like claimed an oblast or a village or something in the name of some other cause. It's all been pretty consolidated under the Ukrainian security forces, which is honestly more than I expected. So I'm happy with that. And they're making good use of what they have. Even if the Azov battalion gets their guns, I mean, they go over to Mariupol and get fucking killed by the Chechens. So in that case, it's Nazi on Nazi violence. So I'm coming out on top no matter who actually wins in Mariupol. Not the civilians though. A lot of people died there. It's just, I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
I guess the left is just missing an opportunity to delight in a military victory over an unambiguous fascist bad guy. And we're meandering here in a way that makes us look bad politically too. Liberals have correctly sided with Ukraine. I don't think it makes us look that good from the left when they look over to us and we're making the same claims like Marjorie Taylor Greene does. Like we're like rubbing our hands and going, well, you know, maybe that money should go somewhere else. Maybe, you know, Putin should keep the territory or whatever. It makes us look pretty weird.
Right. I mean, if I don't know what a peace negotiation would look like. What I think is that the Ukraine should win the war and Putin should leave Russia. Like, that's another thing too. Like we keep talking, like the leftists keep talking about how to end the war, and they always like purposefully ignore the most obvious and quickest way to end the war, and that would be for Putin to fucking pull Russia out of Ukraine. They never mention that though. Like that's it. War over if Putin pulls Russia out. Like that's it.
They never, no, literally, they never bring that up. They act like it's unreasonable for us to expect them to accept the condition that they not do the unjustified fascist invasion, which is so weird. Like, what? It's almost like Russian propaganda. Like you're giving them that as default. It's like, oh well, the invasion's already begun. Like, no, you can't factor in their invasion as like a neutral moral, like just initiating factor, like some coincident issue that we just have to live with now. That factors into the morality of the equation here. It certainly delegitimizes any like peace talks they attempt to make, right? Like the only reason they're making peace talks right now is because they're starting to lose. It makes them, I think, look quite silly, right? Like they would posture for this 3-day military intervention, and now they're doing like a full mobilization, and their like economy is failing, and their protests in the streets, and they're losing territory, and it's like, okay, well, do we really have to give them anything here, honestly?
Right. I mean, yeah. If they walk away with Crimea, I mean, it happened in 2014. Ukraine didn't, they weren't happy, obviously, and I'm sure not everyone in Crimea was happy about it. But if Russia walks away and keeps Ukraine, and that's keeps Crimea, and that's the end of it, that wouldn't be the worst possible solution. But to give up the mainland Ukraine, it just doesn't make any sense, especially when Russia's doing these faux votes for annexation, and clearly rigged to beyond belief. I mean, the idea that, oh yes, they voted for it, come on. I mean, and to even like sort of hold, like what was Elon Musk's suggestion, that like the UN sanction a vote in those 4 areas. I mean, that's still ceding the ground to Russia, saying you were right that we should ask these 4 territories whether or not they should be part of Ukraine or Russia. I mean, it's just bizarre, and especially bizarre. I know the focus isn't Elon Musk, but I fucking hate the guy, and it was especially bizarre for Elon Musk to do that after he gained so much good grace and fortune from the Ukrainian people for his help via Starlink. I mean, it was like almost like, it's understandable, but like I was gagging at all the Ukrainian officials having to constantly go, oh, thank you, Elon Musk, for your help with Starlink. And I get that they needed that shit, but I was like, oh my God, I fucking hate hearing this. But now they're saying like, fuck you to him, and I love it. I mean, the guy couldn't help but fucking just be one of these pro-Putin, pro-Russia a-holes, even to this country that basically was treating him like a national hero. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he's leaned really hard into the Republican thing since then, and he's with the culture war bullshit. He's also like done a lot of like sussy shit about saying like, well, China workers are better because they'll work for 25 hours a day and they don't have labor laws. So it seems like he's sort of headed down the same like, I guess, like fascist robber baron angle where you make allies with all the worst humans on earth because they'll let you exploit their labor like that much more than the democracies will. I guess in that context it would make sense. I don't know. He's also like a fucking idiot, so it's pretty hard to tell. He might have legitimately just woken up and thought like, here's my very smart solution, as if like the U.S. could have held a referendum in Iraq in like 2004 and been like, oh, okay, well, can we annex this territory? Yes or no? And if they had like by some miracle said yes, like that justifies our intervention there. And like civilians flee conflict-ridden areas as well. So like if you do a referendum on an area that Russia has invaded on whether Russia can stay, the people remaining there are disproportionately likely to support Russia. They also face threats of violence if they don't, because if the UN decides that Russia has to leave because they got voted no on, they're going to kill a bunch of people on the way out, like they do every fucking time they retreat from a territory. So why would anyone vote no, the Russians shouldn't be here on a referendum when the Russian armed forces are present to like spitefully engage in retribution? It's just, it's Elon Musk, so of course it's really, really dumb. But yeah,
Right,
I don't
right.
know. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad the Ukrainian forces are winning. It's been going well for them. Every day they reclaim more territory.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I guess at some point it's Putin will run out of people to just send over to their deaths. I mean, I feel bad for some of those people in Russia too. Like, obviously the Ukrainian people are the most direct victims. They're the one facing the threat of bombings and shellings and things like that every day. But don't discount. Obviously, I'm not saying you do, but to listeners, don't discount like the people in Russia who are feeling, the sanctions and family members being forced to go there. And I was reading a story the other day about this Russian artist, like a rapper, who committed suicide as a protest because he didn't want to be drafted over there because he said he refused to shoot at any individual, in Ukraine. I mean, it's horrible, and of course, these are the people who are feeling the real, they're the real casualties of this war.
Oh, for sure. No, I think in many ways Russians are equal victims to what's happening right now. All the soldiers that are being conscripted, Russian men, even students, which is wild, being ripped from their homes to be like, given some rusty gear and being thrown against like extremely high morale Ukrainians wielding top of the line US military equipment, Like Russians are over there like hauling the donkey's worth of gear to cross a river like that's up to their waist, and meanwhile there are Ukrainians that are like speed translating the instruction manuals on these HIMARS and like precision targeting gnats from 400 miles away. I feel bad for them too. Yeah, I guess just the more suffering this produces faster, I think, the more likely things are to break quickly. It's like a ripping the Band-Aid off thing, right? Like the invasion of Iraq killed far fewer people than the long-term occupation of Iraq because things
Right.
drag out, like the systemic failures mount, and I'm hoping like whatever is going to oust Putin, like it has to be like the utter demoralization of the Russian people, which hopefully is a precursor to a better world, like a better Russia, one without Putin. But that's my hope.
And so yeah, that's the dream world of the future, right? I mean, there's only one way that happens though, and that's if the rest of the world continues to put this pressure on them. I mean, the people in Russia certainly are, even before the draft. Obviously, I'm skeptical always of why corporations do what they do, but all these Western companies and restaurants and chains leaving Russia. I mean, I remember reading the stories like when some like athletic, I remember it was like Adidas or Nike, they pulled out, and like the lines from people to buy the stuff the last day before the store closed. Like, you don't think like people in Russia are getting sick and tired of feeling like they're in this like, walled garden of cut off from the rest of the world. They're not used to it like, like maybe people in China are, and it's not that big of a deal. Like Russia doesn't have all these Russian-based companies that basically are like the U.S. or the Western world's version of, this fast food chain and this clothing company and this service and this product like China does. So I'm sure it's hitting people in Russia a lot harder that like, oh, I can't do this. I can't get this. I can't use this. We're like in a different universe.
No, I completely agree. And this is why I get so angry when you have all these, and this is the line for me, right? You have all these OPSEC, like liberal pieces of shit, who, when Russians were fleeing from Russia to avoid the draft, they were like, no, stay in your country, fight against Putin. Which, A, is the same logic that fascists used against Syrian refugees, and B, it's a reaffirmation of the logic that people like Putin used to stay in power. Because to the Russian citizen, they may think Putin is bad, but if they believe the rest of the world hates them, which is what the Kremlin has always been telling them, that they're like the last onslaught against American imperialism and the rest of the world would disintegrate them if they could, they will choose Putin over annihilation. The only sensible way forward is to remind the Russian people that, as unfortunate as their conscription is, while we will continue to fight against their invasion, they are victims too, and if Putin was removed, they are as worthy of restitution as any other victim of this conflict or of the Kremlin. But these fucking idiots, of course, because at the end of the day, like, the liberals in our countries only support Ukraine because it's an American hegemony thing, right? Like, the fucking, these OPSEC dipshits with the Ukrainian flags in their bios support Ukraine because, for the same reason they would have supported Iraq, right? They were morally lucky this time. They lucked into the correct answer this time. But the situation could have been entirely different, and they would have just supported blindly whoever the Americans picked. And I hate them for it, and they worsen the conflict, and they're going to make Russian people look and see like, oh, wow, well, this war may suck, but the rest of the world fucking hates me. So I guess this is just what we're stuck with.
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's still going on to the same degree, but when this first started in like February and then continuing in like March and April, like all these weird like world stage type organizations, like whether it's like sporting events or whatever, like forcing like Russian athletes to that they couldn't play or something like that. It was just bizarre, and that's not going to serve to like if the whole point. I don't even like. If the U.S. government's end game is that like the Russian people do end up turning against Putin, like that certainly wasn't helping the issue. It's only going to enforce those ideas that, oh, they don't hate Putin, they hate me because I'm Russian.
Yes, yeah, and canceling Russian plays and shit. Like, isn't the point of international media and art the idea that beyond the state, beyond the border, we are all brethren, like we are all brothers and sisters across the world? Like, and we may fight, but our people enjoy the fruits of each other's cultural production. Is this not like a unifying moment for us? But when the liberals turn around and they go, no, now we can't listen to Russian films and watch Russian plays, and like it becomes an essentialist, ethnocentric argument against the existence of the Russian people, which is insane.
Right. And on that too, like back to our discussion about like lefties' reaction to all this, the I've seen some people be like, sort of look at Russia as if it's still like the Soviet Union, and like their love for like Lenin somehow is now boosting Putin without realizing that Putin fucking hates Lenin. Like he said it over and over again in many speeches that, he thought he was did not fucking agree with him. He was not a fan of Lenin, and even he criticized Stalin too for all the the Stalinites out there on the left. I mean, he's not in that same vein as Lenin or even Stalin whatsoever. He's not like your Soviet hero. It's bizarre to see some of the people look at Putin as if like, oh, he's just one in their line of Soviet heroes.
He's in line in the sense that, like all good Soviet heroes, he is a authoritarian revisionist who hates his predecessors. So in that respect, he's continuing the tradition phenomenally. But aside from that, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually had a regular listener in the show. He sort of shocked me a few weeks ago. He's this guy Renee from Chile. He's a really good source I have to, I had him on the show for a number of times over the years to talk about what's going on in Chile with their socialist, their well, for that country, their socialist president. He's a millennial, and he sort of out of the blue shocked me with his take on Russia and Ukraine, sort of against them both, like not liking the idea of, he doesn't support Russia, obviously, because he's anti-Putin, but he doesn't support Ukraine because of the Nazis there. But I mean, again, it's pretty simple. Like, you don't have to support I mean, I know that's not everybody's take, but if it really rankles your feathers, like if you need to be distance yourself from any sort of government entity, you feel like you're that contrarian, you don't have to support Zelensky and the Ukrainian government or any military in Ukraine. But the people in Ukraine are the ones taking all this, and they're the ones who are invaded. And if you looked at what the U.S. did in Iraq as horrible, and you were for the Iraqi people, I mean, the same thing extends here. I mean, I'm sure none of you who wanted, us to leave Iraq and stop, killing all these poor Iraqi civilians, I'm sure none of you were like cheering on the I don't know, whoever, the Iraqi military or whoever we were still fighting over there at various points over the years, Al Qaeda or whatever. I don't know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I don't know. A critical distinction here as well is that in those cases, there was nothing Iraq could have done to defend against us. Like, there's nothing anyone can do against us. Whereas in the case with Ukraine, this is an opportunity for like an actual difference to be made, which is generally not the case when lefties take like geopolitical sides, right? I don't know. It's just a unifying thing, I think, to an extent. A repudiation of global fascism. There are Nazis with Ukraine, sure. I mean, first of all, former Soviet states have a problem with Nazis broadly. It's hardly just a Ukraine thing. Ukraine's probably a lot better off than, say, Serbia. Or it's a lot of its neighbors. And what's more, like, it's really more about the ideological motivations behind all this. The Nazis in Ukraine fight against Russia because they're Ukrainian nationalists. But the maintenance of Ukraine's borders is not itself like a Nazi goal, because there are plenty of Nazis on the Russian side as well, like the Wagner Group and such, and
of course, you never. And again, this isn't the good faith leftists, but like the Dorites, the Jimmy Dorites, they love bringing up Azov, which is fair, but they never bring up, like you mentioned, the Wagner Group or any of the other Russian nationalists, or the various different factions on the Russian side, like the Chechens, and they're a horrible leader there, who for some reason these weirdo contrarian quote unquote lefties seem to love that guy.
Yeah, you mean the guy who's ideologically just Kadyrov, the guy who is just a Nazi, like in every ideological sense, like might as well just be a Nazi and that's it. He got made an army general just the other day as well. This guy is about as far right as you can get ideologically. I mean, he's got like war crimes tattooed all over him, and but a lot of lefties really like him. And I think that I think a lot of lefties are basically just nationalists for anti-American countries. Unfortunately, I've noticed that like pretty often too. I mean, Dorr is an obvious case. Like, he's just a fascist who appeals to American conservatives. From the Jimmy Dore. Yeah.
He has no reason to talk about any of this other than the fact that he's obsessed with growing his right-wing audience. Like, listen, I have my opinions on this, based on my ideological beliefs, but I'm in no way like a foreign policy expert. And Ukraine is in Russia. is not my forte. So on my own show, like when my audience talks with me, when they call in, I take calls and it comes up. We talk about it, but I don't do like shows portraying my lengthy show after show portraying myself as like providing regular coverage as an expert or whatever. Jimmy Dore, who probably never even talked about Ukraine once before Russia invaded the country in his years and years doing his show, all of a sudden it's like every other episode he's got Jackson Hinkle or like Max Blumenthal on to talk about the latest in the Ukraine-Russia war, of course, from the perspective of pro-Putinite. I mean, it's bizarre if you're someone who I guess didn't see the Jimmy Dore turn over the years, but I mean, there's no other way to explain it other than he knows that's bringing in right-wing views. He's sort of, if you watch him even talk about it, you can tell he doesn't care. Like he knows nothing about it, and you think if you were doing episode after episode after episode, you would at some point at least do some reading and research to update yourself with what's going on.
No, Dore and Hinkle are just here for the money. I think Blumenthal is legitimate in his dishonesty, in the sense that they're essentially just like they're like the America First Front back in like the 1930s, right? They're fascists whose job it is to try to flank from the left and give like disaffected, populist, anti-imperialist leftists an entry point to fascist politics. In language that they're receptive to, it's no different than like the youth group preacher leaning into the kids and asking them like, who else would have liked Roblox? I don't fucking know. Jesus Christ. You try to appeal to whatever metrics they're interested in, and there are a lot of lefties with a very poor understanding of foreign policy who are vulnerable to that kind of hook. And like the stuff they say is incompatible with leftism in every front. There's not really much of a front to it anymore. A year ago, Jimmy Dore was a bit more ambiguous, right? Hinkle for a while was a bit more ambiguous, but now they're just sort of unambiguously fascist in every respect, with no obfuscation or doubt. Apparently, Kadyrov called on Moscow to use low-yield nuclear weapons in Ukraine just yesterday, saying that they should tactically nuke villages they were forced to retreat from.
I mean, that guy is. I was familiar with him simply like way before this, simply because of his love for MMA and his weird connections to to a number of UFC fighters. And I mean, again, like the right wing connections here. Of course, this guy would be buddies with Dana White, who's buddies with the Republican Party here in the U.S. But like, that's how I was familiar with him. The dude's got like a MMA team that literally has a number of athletes in the UFC.
Oh, well, the MMA and the UFC have always had kind of the mixed martial arts has always been the sort of a favorite, like, weird hobby of the insane, like, cult of personality fascists. So I guess that's not too surprising, though it's always weird how it plays out.
Right, yeah. Real leftists watch pro wrestling because that's the left.
The proletarian sport, yeah.
Yes, that somehow became, because it's theater too, and lefties love theater. Lefties love putting, theatrical into even like their protests with like puppetry and dancing and all sorts of stuff. So of course, pro wrestling would be, yes, of course, yes. But I mean, MMA could be too, but I guess that's the more masculine. That's the real men. The real men are MMA fighters.
Well, that's the delusional kind of gay, where they're dressed up in nothing, punching each other in the balls and like crawling around all sweaty, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, this is actually the most masculine heterosexual sport in the world." But then you go into professional wrestling, and they're wearing like studded like jeans with those like frills and power bombing each other. And I don't think there's much of a pretense there. It's just fun.
Right, and of course, it's sort of like our version of the wrestling's like the open border sport too, with luchadors, with lucha libre, and then the Japanese wrestlers with their fighting spirit, and we got a whole slew of Canadians like Bret Hart and Chris Jericho, and it sort of has its own indie federations all over the world. Whereas I feel like every MMA fighter is like nowadays is either an American, a Chechnyan, or a Russian.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cultural product, right? I mean, they all want to prove what men they are, It's just a very popular front, I guess, and apparently a good entry into politics. I mean, Andrew Tate, of course, got into it with MMA. So it seems like a good, because you start with the vitamin supplements and the here's how to be a man and pick up chicks, and then you get into like the real good shit, like why you need an ethno state. But it all starts in the ring.
Yep, yep.
I'm glad we're both anti-fascism and anti-nuclear war. I was going to spend some part of the night reading up on South Africa and doing some research, so I'm probably going to have to head and do that. But I'm happy to have finally
Right.
had an opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. This was a good talk. I enjoyed it, and yeah, we should do more in the future.
I'd be happy to talk with you in the future. And
Sounds.
if
I
you
think we
said
are the
anything
only. I
spicy
think
in the video. Oh, yeah?
I think you and I are actually the only two real lefties to ever step foot into the Tim Pool compound.
Yes. Wait, actually, I can't think of another example. Oh, and good job with that, by the
Right.
way.
Oh, thank you, and same to you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I just hate flying, man. I just fucking hate, because they do it to put you on their turf, right? Like it's a lot easier to hold you um to hold you to the ground when there's like three
Oh,
people there and you've they got the spotlights on you. Yeah.
right. That didn't bother me as much, and I heard it through the grapevine, and they did this to you too. Um, they didn't tell me I could bring a laptop and that I had the ability to also look up and fact check them live on air. I mean, when you go on any other live program, that's not the case. Like, sure, when I'm live streaming and sitting in front of my computer talking with you like I am right now, I do that. But like, I've been on other live TV, and you don't do that. You don't. They don't let you bring your computer and open it on the desk and research live on the air. If they had told me I could do that, I would have brought a computer. I heard they did the same thing to you and didn't tell you that you could bring a computer.
I don't think I knew the first time. I knew the second time, but I had to stay on guard and maintain eye contact with Charlie Kirk. 'Cause he's taller than me and he's got a long reach. He could have gotten me from across the table at any moment. I had to keep watch.
Yeah, I don't think it was purposeful. I don't want to spread any rumors, but would have been nice to have the laptop. But I think both of us held our own without it. So yeah. So it
Yeah,
was ladies
winning
and
my
gentlemen.
debate by bringing the YouTube video of loud air horn .wav along with me, so that whenever I don't have an answer, I can just blare it across the
Right,
studio.
right. Yeah, I mean that would have been pretty good. Yeah, do you have any interesting stories from when you were there? Because it was an experience. They were very nice, but it was an experience. Some weird moments.
Yeah, well, he's got like a fucking compound and an underground skating rink. So, just sort of wandering around and interacting with all the people there was quite fun. Everyone there was very nice, so I have nothing to complain about on that front. Um, they sketched caricatures
First,
of me and Tim after me and Charlie after the debate, which I thought was pretty cute.
yeah, they did the same for me, and they used a really old photo of mine, and I was like, it was a very good, a very good drawing, but I was upset that the photo they used. But my first experience meeting Tim Pool in person was I met everyone else, talking to everyone else, sitting in the studio waiting for him, and he walks in, takes his sword off the wall, and starts cleaning it in front of me. Just takes the blade out and just starts like cleaning it with some sort of fluid, and I'm like, oh, nice to meet you. He's like, hey, nice to, again, very nice, but very weird first time, very weird first impression. I don't
That's
know.
when you pull out a Glock and disassemble it in front of him so that you can like, oil up the slide while making eye
Right.
contact. That's the
Right.
only way to respond. He
Right.
didn't do that with me. I didn't have to deal with that social situation. I don't know what I would have done in that moment. I don't know what my critical response would have been. Maybe you like you walk up to him and you sort of just like slap the edge of the sword, like bleed all over the place, and you're like, ha, that's pretty sharp, bro. And then you like claps from blood loss. I don't know. I don't know what the right move is there.
Right. He also showed me this old like Civil War era rifle he had up against the wall, and he was like, "You want to pick it up?" And he told me how old it was, and I was like, "I'm not fucking touching this thing. And if it like falls apart in my hands, he's gonna blame me for breaking it." So I didn't pick it. I was like, "No, I'm good." And then I didn't see this clip, but someone told me that like a few weeks later, he brings up how he had a leftist on the show who was afraid of touching his guns, and I was like, I would have touched a gun. It was the fact that it was some old ass gun that was sitting up again. For all I knew, it was broken to begin with, and he would have blamed me for breaking it.
Yeah, he fucking got you there. He hands you a gun. It's got like poop smeared all over it, and you're like, wait, and I don't want to touch that. And he's like, lefties, you know. He rolls with that for the rest of his career. Do you know if it was it a Union or a Confederate rifle?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I just recall it sitting there and him asking if I want to pick it up, and I was in my head, I was like, I do sort of, but it's also very old, and I don't know what, who knows what would have happened if I picked up that rifle. It could have fallen apart. It could have went off. Rigged. Yep. But we'll have to. I guess you have another segment to talk about,
yeah,
and
we'll
we'll talk about our
appropriate responses to the sword polishing opener in the future.
Right. Would you mind if I quickly, because you have such a large audience comparatively to me, not when I'm on Majority Report, but my own, youtube.com/Matt Binder. I was actually live streaming my own show when someone in my chat said, Vaush is watching you on Majority Report earlier. So I then pulled up your live stream on my live stream. So basically, my viewers are watching me live stream with you on your live stream while you watched me on the Majority Report live stream from earlier that day. So a lot of Inception type things going on there.
It's a good thing that
YouTube.com.
the website I have auto blocks any slurs posted in my chat so that you don't get in trouble with Twitch.
There you go. Yeah. I'm on Twitch too. So youtube.com/Matt Binder, twitch.tv/Matt Binder. I'm multicasting. Don't leave Vaush, obviously. Vaush, you viewers, I'm not telling you to do that, but whenever I'm on and Vaush isn't, come check it out. Subscribe to the channel.
They should leave. We're about to do a research stream. This is a great time for them to get out.
All right, take care, man. This was great. Have a great night.
You have a wonderful night. Thank you for coming on.